All right, we're going to go ahead and get started. Once again, thank you very much for taking time to attend this webinar, Doing Business with Colombia. We had done a survey previously to ask our clientele and our members and the general exporting audience what countries they were interested in learning more about, in Europe, Asia, South America, just everywhere we could think of. And by a pretty good margin, we got results of South America, and then more specifically looking at Colombia because of the free trade agreement. And of course, that's always a real advantage to do business with those countries that we have a free trade agreement with, because it creates a level playing field and makes it much more likely that you'll be able to do business there effectively. All right, well, just some housekeeping. Today's presentation will be recorded, and we hope to be able to have the recording available for review within about 48 hours after this presentation. And there's also some housekeeping stuff there about your mic and being able to listen and all of that. Okay. Yes, thank you, Heidi. You should be able to see a little deal on the right-hand side for questions. Do feel free to ask any questions. We'll probably handle the questions at the very end of the session to ask for Dr. Ronderos and those that are pertinent to Melvin. And but do feel free to ask questions along the way, and we will try our very best to cover them. Today's webinar, and actually the entire series of webinars that you've been seeing for the last several months and the next several months going forward, are being put on by the Arkansas Manufacturing Solutions Department of Arkansas Economic Development Commission. Their mission is to assist manufacturers to maximize enterprise value by assisting them with innovation, operational excellence, sustainability, and leadership development. We're also part, of course, the Arkansas District Export Council. There's 60 DECs, as we call them, throughout the United States, and they're charged with encouraging and supporting the export of goods and services that will strengthen individual companies, stimulate U.S. economic growth, and create jobs. We have also today Melvin Torres with World Trade Center, and it's part of the Arkansas University of Arkansas. And the mission of the World Trade Center is to grow trade and increase Arkansas exports by connecting Arkansas businesses to the world through international trade services. The center is part of the University of Arkansas and serves as the official trade promotion arm for the Arkansas Economic Development Commission. The moderator for today will be Melvin Torres, who's the Director of Western Hemisphere Trade at the World Trade Center in Arkansas, and also Dr. Rondero. Dr. Rondero, actually, let me say a little bit more about Melvin. In addition to being the director, he also has led many delegations on successful trade and diplomacy missions, and is a vital resource to top foreign state officials here, and a key partner of the Arkansas District Export Council, as well as an associate member. Dr. Ronderos has been intensely involved in regional trade organizations and institutions, and has been active in the design of international trade policy and implementation, and he's currently the regional director for the World Trade Center Association of Latin America. Dr. Ronderos served as Minister of International Trade for the Republic of Colombia, and in this capacity, he was president of the Andean Council of Ministers in charge of negotiations of the Free Trade Agreement of the Americas efforts. Dr. Ronderos has been involved in the development of World Trade Centers throughout Latin America and was a board member of the World Trade Centers Association. And as I stated earlier, he's currently the regional director. He has lectured at universities in Colombia and the United States and leads courses for postgraduate students in international trade, and is author of several books on the subject, which is why we chose him to be the speaker on Colombia. He's been involved with the free trade agreement, which is something we're going to talk about, and just knows Colombia extremely well as the United States. And so thank you so much for being here. We're going to go ahead and start off with a poll question, and then we'll get right into it. If you guys would be so kind as to answer the question, is the name of the country Colombia or Colombia? And if you'll choose which one is the correct one, that would be great. Okay. And if we're going to switch this over to Melvin so he can actually read the results of the poll. Melvin, take it away.
Thank you, Rudy. And the correct answer would be Colombia, Colombia. That's important to make sure that you understand the way that the countries are spelled out and said. It is important in business, and you don't want to lose a client because you're misspelling the country's name. We're humbled by having Dr. Ronderos, former Minister of Commerce for Colombia, Foreign Minister of Trade, and foreign negotiator of the free trade agreements in Colombia. And now I'm going to just ask Dr. Ronderos to tell us a little bit more about doing business in Colombia.
Thank you, Melvin. Thank you, Rudy. Thanks to the World Trade Center of Arkansas and the District Council of Arkansas for the invitation. It is an honor to be able to participate in this event. And I thank in the name of Colombia for doing an effort to increase trade between Arkansas and Colombia.
Slides.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, Doctor.
So, for those of you who do not know, Colombia is one of the 4 big countries of Latin America with a population of around 15 million people. That makes Colombia one of the 4. Mexico, Brazil, Argentina, and Colombia are the 4 largest countries in the region. So it's a very interesting market to explore. It's been a stable democracy for many years. And that means we have presidential elections every 4 years. And we've been having them for more than half a century. The political organization is made of very much like the same in the US, the Senate and the House of Representatives. Colombia had been known for many years for having an internal struggle, guerrillas that were present during the last administration, the Santos administration. There was a peace process, and the former guerrillas of FARC joined the institution. They're now sitting in Congress and not sitting with a rifle in some jungle. So the country is going through a process of appeasement, and that is a good news. We do have some social unrest, particularly nowadays. Probably some of you have seen in the news riots and rallies in Colombia. Probably the result of poverty caused by COVID. The crisis has sent a lot of people out of work. Unemployment rates are high. Many small and medium-sized business ran out of business due to lockdowns during the COVID period. And we're still in the midst of a peak of COVID. So we are having problems with as a result of the crisis of COVID. Some general economic indicators that might also help us understand the country. The gross domestic product, according to the World Bank, is $323 billion US. And the GDP growth included there 2019, because in 2020, like most countries in the world, the GDP decreased. Or we don't have the final result, but it should be somewhere around 4 to 5%. But the country had been growing at rates of between 3 and 5%, so good economic growth. And the GDP per capita is $6,428. This is the GDP resulting from the gross GDP divided by the number of inhabitants. But if you take into account the GDP of taking into account purchasing power, that GDP is somewhere around $11,000. That means there is a purchasing capacity which is interesting for exports into the country. Our currency is the Colombian peso. The exchange rate is $1 for 3,800 pesos. The peso has been moving between 3,000 and 4,000 pesos per dollar. We have had devaluation due to the COVID crisis, particularly because of uncertainty derived from the crisis. But throughout the years, the peso is a relatively stable currency because we have very much under control inflation. Inflation in the country ranges between 1 and 3%. Even now that the country has acquired a lot of debt, and we're up to 56% of the country's GDP as debt, which is of course much lower than you have in the US. And that means pumping more money into the economy, which was needed for the COVID crisis. Even with that situation, inflation is way under control, so that gives it a very stable economic environment. Of course, during this period, exports fell, so did imports, and there is a recorded deficit of 3.1 billion in December 2020 in our current account. So like most countries in the world, the numbers for 2020 are not very good, but we hope that the country will recover once this crisis is over, once we get the vaccination and the herd immunity in place, as will happen in many other countries of the world. We have one of the countries that have free trade agreements with the US. This is very important because, like Rudy was mentioning, this gives business a leveling field, opportunities to do business without having a preferential access to the market. The countries that have free trade agreements with the US are Mexico, the Central American countries, Colombia, Peru, and Chile. Those are the nations that currently have free trade agreements with the US. The Colombian free trade agreement is in place and since May 2012. So that means we have 9 years into the free trade agreement. What does it give? National treatment. That is, that there will be no discrimination for any business being American. It will have the same rules and regulations as any national company. So that is what is meant by national treatment. Tariff base cannot be modified. When the free trade agreement is negotiated, there is tariffs that are set. And that's the base where tariffs begin to reduce. So that tariff base cannot be modified. So that means the rules with which exporters access the market are not changed in time. They're fixed. Another interesting aspect of this trade deal is that there is no tariff for re-imported goods after repairs. That means that many of the capital equipment that is in Colombia can be taken to the US for a full repair and go back to the country without paying any taxes. That means that there is a great opportunity for business overhauling equipment in the US from Colombia. All tariffs were to be eliminated in a maximum of 17 years. We're already 9 years into the free trade agreement. That means that in only 6 years' time, we will be having 7 years' time, we will be having the whole universe of the tariff structure in zero. Right now, every product coming from Colombia to the US pays no tax. There's a complete elimination of tariffs from Colombia to the US. And US products were subject to 3 categories of reduction: immediate reduction, 5 years, 10 years, and 12 years. Right now, we're into the year 9, so there is only very small taxes for some very rare products, but basically the bulk of goods that are traded from the US to Colombia pay no tariffs and enter in a preferential, they have a preferential access to the Colombian market. Not so much with services, this is goods. The chapter of services is very much restricted as it is in the World Trade Organization, and services that can be rendered from the US are basically insurance services and banking services, and that has meant that a lot of US banks have settled in Colombia, and much of the foreign direct investment, as we will see from the US to Colombia, is directed to services that are being offered in Colombia. In the case of agriculture, there is one important aspect. There were contingents and quotas for agricultural products, for rice and chicken, but those will disappear in the year 12. So, and the tariff is being reduced and the quota is being increased. And there was the elimination of the Andean price band. This was a mechanism by means of which the tariff would grow when the price would be low and would be reduced when the price was high. So the local production would have protection no matter whether the prices were low or the prices were high. In the case of the US-Colombia trade agreement, the Andean price band was eliminated. And that has given the US a great advantage for grains that were previously imported from Argentina and Uruguay and Brazil are now being imported from the US. So in the agricultural world, there has been an increase in exports from the US to Colombia. So these are some of the most important aspects of the trade agreement. If there are more questions, we will deal with them later on. What do we export? Colombian trade flow. What does the US export to Colombia? Well, the first item is minerals and fuels. That is refined petrol, because the refineries in Colombia are not capable of refining the total amount of gasoline which is needed. So there are exports of petrol to the US and refined petrol on the way back. But as you can see, cereals is the second item. And that's because, as I was mentioning, there is a great advantage for US agricultural exports since the free trade agreement was signed. The third is industrial machinery, organic chemicals, food industry. So those are the exports of the US, the main exports. As you can see, the exports is amounted in 2019 to $14 billion, but in 2020, exports fell to around $12,000 billion. Now, that's what the US exports what does Arkansas export to Colombia? That would be the question. And first, what does Arkansas export to the world? On the left-hand side of the screen, you can see what Arkansas exports to the world. The main export is aircraft and spacecraft and parts. That's the aerial industry. Industrial machinery, plastics, cereals, electric machinery. And what does Arkansas export to Colombia? Well, the first item is medical products. As you can see, exports of Arkansas to Colombia are still very low. They amounted in 2019 to almost $60 million. It fell in 2020, and the chemical products fell almost to half of what had been in 2019. Optic and photo is also a small export, 5 million. Organic chemicals, 4 million, and it fell as well in 2020. Industrial machinery had a tremendous fall from $5 million to $1 million. But what this comparison shows is that many of the goods that Arkansas is exporting to the world are not reaching Colombian market. And that gives a great opportunity for new products into the Colombian market. There is no reason why those $59 million of 2019 cannot be increased once the crisis is over. And something that should be interesting for the audience wanting to do business in Colombia is where they can ship their products to Colombia. The Arkansas exports use primarily the port of Charleston to go to Colombia in South Carolina, the port of New Orleans in Louisiana, the port of Mobile in Alabama, the port of Savannah in Georgia, the port of Houston, Texas, and Miami International Airport. So those are the 6 most important ports used by exporters in Arkansas to the Colombian market. It's interesting to mention the Miami International Airport because there is a great opportunity there for exporters. As many of you might know, Colombia is a very large exporter of flowers, basically roses and carnations. And those flowers are transported into the US, into the Miami International Airport by air. And during particularly two dates in the US, that's Mother's Day and Valentine, there are hundreds of planes leaving Colombia full of flowers into Miami, but they don't have cargo to go back to Colombia. So the freight is very competitive if the Miami International Airport is used to take goods from the US to Colombia. And the ports that are used are basically Cartagena, Santa Marta. Now, I'll show you this next slide. This is a map of Colombia. As you see, Colombia has a coast in the Caribbean, and it has coast on the Pacific Ocean. All the ports that we have just mentioned that are primarily used by Arkansas business community to export to Colombia, they are in the Caribbean Sea, in the Gulf of Mexico. And they reach primarily 3 ports, the port of Santa Marta, the port of Barranquilla, and the port of Cartagena, being the port of Cartagena the largest container, and it's a very important port. Now, for those shipping through the Pacific, which is not the case from Arkansas, they come through the port of Buenaventura. The 3 main markets in Colombia are Bogota, which you can see there in the center, with a population of 8 million people, Medellin, which is north of Bogota, with a population of 4 to 5 million people, and it's a very important market. And Cali, which is down near Buenaventura, which is a city of also 3 million people, and it's a very important market. Another very important market is the concentration of the cities that are on the Caribbean Sea, Santa Marta, Barranquilla, Cartagena. 3 of them are very important. So you can see that the ports used, and there are very good routes going from this port to the city of Bogota, to the city of Medellin, and to the city of Cali. So logistically, there is a great opportunity, and those are the ports that can be used. What does Colombia export to the US and to Arkansas? Basically, oil, petrol, that's Colombia's main exports. Gold is the second. Coffee, light trees and plants, which is flour, aluminum products, edible fruits, which is basically bananas, plastics. And what does the Colombia export to Arkansas? As you can see, very little, $2 million. And it increased during 2020, and it's basically essential oils, perfumery, cosmetics, coffee, vegetables, iron articles, but they're minor things. So for importers seeking to bring products that might be competitive into the Arkansas market, we can check on the left what Colombia exports, and there also should be great opportunity. But not only trade is important. We believe that investment is very important. The US foreign direct investment in Colombia was $8.3 billion in 2019, and it increased in 2.6% from 2018. And there is a large investment in mining, manufacturing, finance, and insurance. On the other hand, Colombian investment in the US is low. It's $174 million. It's important to note that when there is an American investment in Colombia, the investors have no limits in repatriation of their profit or even pulling out their capital. There are no penalties or no taxes for profits that are remitted back home. And there is no taxes or capital that has served its purpose in the country, and the investor wants to bring it out. US-owned affiliates are very active in services, about $5.2 billion, while sales of services in the United States, Colombian-owned firms were only $130 million. Those services are basically like finance and insurance operations. So investment is very important, it's growing. And why is investment important? Because the tax system is relatively stable. Corporate income taxes for Colombian companies and for international companies is 32%. Gains have a 10% tax or gains or dividends, and unless they are remitted to the home country, in which case they do not pay. The added value tax is basically, there are different value-added taxes, but most of the products are in the 19% range. There is a financial transaction on banking operations of 0.4%, and there is a local tax for industry called Industria y Comercio, Industry and Commerce, which is divided by the city. But being that the tax system is a tax system very much the same as all the countries in the region, we should be aware of the existence of free trade zones. That's very interesting because free trade zones, there are over 30 free trade zones in Colombia. so that investment of the US coming to Colombia can be in the free trade zones, and they would have a lot of benefits on top of the benefits and advantages derived from the free trade agreement. Instead of paying 32% tax, it pays 20% tax of corporate taxes. It has excluded from VAT payment. One question I always get is, if I produce in a free trade zone in Colombia, do I get the benefit of origin? That is to say, my goods would be origin of Colombia, although they're not paying taxes, and the answer is yes. In the free trade agreement with the US, goods coming from free trade zones are accepted as national goods of Colombia and enjoy the benefits of not paying tariffs when arriving to the US. And all the parts and inputs in any processing plant are exempted from VAT for goods and services. So free trade opportunities free trade zones is a great opportunity for investment. If you look at Colombia, if you see it in the Americas, it's right in the middle between the US and South America. So it's got a very strategic location for companies wanting to serve the market of Latin America. Just to mention, a flight from Bogota to New York is 5.5 hours, and a flight from Bogota to Buenos Aires is 5.5 hours. That means Colombia is right in the middle between the US, and it's got access through the Atlantic and the Pacific. So it's convenient if you produce in one of the free trade zones in the ports in Colombia. It's easy to ship products to Ecuador, Peru, Chile on the Pacific, or Mexico in the Pacific and Central America, and from ports in the Atlantic to Venezuela, Brazil, Argentina, Uruguay, and Paraguay.
So Dr. Ronderos, this means that Colombia is just a wonderful center place to be a gateway to the rest of South America.
Yes, very much so. And if you look at the free trade agreements that the country has, there's the Pacific Alliance, which includes Mexico, Peru, and Chile. That means goods coming from Colombia to these countries pay no taxes. There is the Andean Community that includes Peru, Bolivia, and Ecuador. That means goods coming from Colombia don't pay any tariffs in those countries. Like the FTA with the US, there is a free trade agreement with the European Union, so it's a good place to access the market of the European Union. Free trade agreement with Korea, and there is a free trade agreement with the Mercosur countries, which are Brazil, Argentina, Uruguay, Paraguay. So yes, not only the location, but the preferential access that goods from produced in Colombia can have in both North, Central, and South America. So it's a very important location with very good market access.
Dr. Ronderos, now that you mentioned that, the location of Colombia, as you are pointing out, is very convenient. How do you see, after the pandemic and the supply chain interruptions that happened in the United States and worldwide, how do you see that a shift from procuring and importing certain goods from countries like areas like Asia, for example, could actually move to countries like Colombia that are closer by? And do you think that would have that will be a lesson learned from the interruptions in supply chain during the pandemic?
Yes, after many years of offshoring,
Looks like we're having some sort of technical glitch here.
We are, yes. Okay, so he is trying to get back on again, and I apologize for that. It seems like an interruption in communication or a computer.
I do want to address the question that you were asking Dr. Ronderos, about the supply chain and the changes that might be occurring. Given your position with the World Trade Center, what have you been seeing?
Well, certainly the pandemic, as we saw, left many industries paralyzed at the beginning, and still they're lagging behind certain aspects of the supply chain. We learned that it takes 30 days or so for a container from Asia to get to the United States to then either manufacture a product or resell that product for consumers. We see now that Latin America, specifically countries like Colombia, that have the manpower, the education, and the location, they can serve, in my opinion, as a better route to try to prevent these disruptions during situations like pandemics or situations like national emergencies, as I tend to call them now. I believe that Colombia is a tremendous resource for that transition. The United States is looking into the supply chain disruption, and they're doing a 100-day review of the supply chain in the United States. So after those 100 days, we're going to see what the findings are. Certainly, we know that it failed, and I expect that Latin America is going to play a more prominent role in manufacturing, in exporting, and also as a consumer market for the United States. That way, items that cannot be manufactured in the United States, or there's a better competitive advantage of manufacturing them in another country, can be manufactured in a country like Colombia that has lower wages, similar to Asia, and has the manpower to manufacture it and the infrastructure. So to me, that has been very important. And to your question, Rudy, I believe that Colombia, just being right in the middle, looking at this map, it certainly makes a big difference for the United States to receive raw material and to receive manufactured goods to be used, so the supply chain does not get interrupted and we don't have national emergencies like we did during 2020.
Absolutely. And of course, if because of the shorter time frame in terms of shipping from, in this case, from Colombia and other parts of South America to the United States, a company could actually have less inventory tied up in their warehouses, because instead of taking 3 months to come from China to the United States, it would take 2 weeks. So consequently, you could have a lot less inventory on hand, which is, I tell my clients and my students that when they see inventory, what they should be seeing is stacks of dollars tied up that they can't use for other things like more machinery, more people to grow their business. I think Dr. Ronderos looks like he may be back on. I see his. Dr. Ronderos, if you will turn on your webcam like you did the last time, and also your audio, I think you should be able to come back on.
And while he does that, I'm going to just mention, as a segue of what you just discussed, just something very, very critical that Dr. Ronderos pointed out. Colombia is an exporter of flowers, of coffee, of tea, of several items that are just consumed worldwide. And the Miami International Airport is a point of entry for those shipments. Like he mentioned, they come back to Colombia, or they go back to Colombia empty. Well, that could be, of course, fixed if we realize that there's a supply chain line there that can be utilized, and we can use that airplane that used to go empty, and we can fill it out with U.S. goods that can be then exported to Colombia.
Perfect. Yeah, I've got a question here, where it's actually more like a comment. Let me see if I can actually see it. Another point is LA to Bogota is almost the same as Bogota to New York. That is an interesting point.
Yes, and again, it is the proximity of Colombia. Definitely, as you can see, they have access to the sea. They have access, by air. It's just a few hours from either California, New York, certainly from Arkansas. Florida being closer to Colombia and being a major hub can definitely serve as a great and important base. But other airports and points of entry can also help in the process, as long as we understand that we can make sure that those airplanes that are going back to Colombia that imported something into the United States can be filled back with U.S. goods, Arkansas goods, and products. And
hey, we can hear you, Dr. Ronderos.
And I think that we have Dr. Ronderos.
Yeah. If you can turn on your webcam, share the webcam like you did last time, I think we will be good to go.
Do I have?
We can hear you.
You can hear me?
Well, yes, sir, I can hear you.
Yes.
No, I'm trying.
If you'll turn
No, I'm on my cell phone. So because my computer.
Oh, okay. Well, let's just do it this way then. Go ahead.
Yes.
I was sorry for something. The whole computer went dead. It's not powered or anything. I am sorry.
It happens.
That is part of the virtual environment after COVID-19. It happens to everyone.
Yeah, let's just continue this way, Dr. Ronderos.
No, I was saying that there is a great challenge for companies that was made evident with COVID, which is how, with all the offshoring that had been taking place and location of logistics operations in Asia with different time zones and different and great distance, interruption of those global value chains resulted in tremendous problems for US companies. And that's when they all decided that a nearshoring strategy would be better.
Absolutely.
That would be to locate in the same time zone. That's very convenient to be in the same time zone. And secondly, to be near and to have the advantages of free trade zones or easy transportation. It's only 3 or 4 days to take a ship from Colombia to one of the ports used by Arkansas. So increasingly, U.S. companies, and with Melvin, we had a meeting with one of the members of Congress interested in nearshoring. So the U.S. companies are exploring how to relocate some of their import operations in somewhere in Latin America. And what is clear is that Colombia has one of the most advantages, having the outlet in the 2 oceans, having a free trade zone regime that will allow for benefits in taxes, and having a free trade agreement that will give those inputs access with no tariffs to the US.
which was not the case for products that were manufactured in India or in China or in Vietnam that had to pay taxes entering the US. Even more so now that the tense situation with China has resulted in higher tariffs for products coming from the East. So there is a great opportunity to relocate. And I would say that Colombia is one of those places where relocation should be an opportunity for US companies.
You know, Dr. Ronderos, one of the things that really this picture just shows so clearly, while, you know, the Arkansas District Export Council is putting on this webinar, we have listeners, viewers on the webinar from all over the country and actually different parts of the world. And what this shows just the wonderful positioning of Colombia in the fact that it does have access to both the Atlantic and the Pacific. I mean, just a strategic location, isn't it?
Yes, and I think that there's also the labor factor, because Colombia has an interesting group of professionals, very good universities. So one of the problems sometimes when companies seek to locate elsewhere is to have the capacity in the local population to have engineers, to have qualified labor to be able to produce what's being offered. And I think Colombia has one of the highest standards of education in the region, and plenty of universities in engineering and other areas that can supply a good percentage, a good quantity of skilled labor for the development of new facilities in the supply chain efforts of nearshoring.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
So, Dr. Ronderos, would you like to switch over to the questions that Melvin, I think, is ready to pose to you?
Well, I can't have access because from my cell phone, it's limited, the access I have. If you could read it to me, I would appreciate it.
Yeah, and so Melvin will ask the questions, and you know, you will answer them as best as you can. Go ahead, Melvin.
Thank you, Rudy. So, Dr. Ronderos, you actually mentioned something that I wanted to ask, and that was about labor. But then the next question would be infrastructure. How is the infrastructure in Colombia posed to handle manufacturing facilities that could supply the United States with what it currently manufactures or receives from offshoring?
I would say that infrastructure, as far as energy, is plenty. It's competitive price-wise. So there is excess capacity in the infrastructure of electricity. Colombia produces most of its energy in hydro, and it's got a new facility which is coming in 2023, Hidroituango. So there is a good infrastructure in electricity. The port infrastructure is quite efficient. Ports like Cartagena has been singled out as one of the most efficient ports in the Caribbean for several years. So that's interesting. Now, if you're thinking of offshoring, the most convenient thing would be to locate near the ports, where there is also free trade zones. There is not much point in locating in Bogota, which is 1,000 kilometers inside the country, or in cities that, although might be an interesting local market, it's not the best location to cater a nearshoring operation where you're going to export all your production, either to the US or to factories elsewhere in the world. So with good infrastructure in ports and good infrastructure in electricity and access to the ports, I think that the free trade zones located both in the Atlantic and the Pacific near the ports, there are free trade zones in Cartagena, Barranquilla, Santa Marta. So I think there is a good infrastructure capable of supporting an operation of that nature.
Thank you, Dr. Ronderos. So if we are if we're looking at Arkansas companies and small businesses, what would you recommend to an Arkansas small business or an Arkansas medium-sized business or large company that wants to export their products to Colombia? What would you tell them that to entice them to do that? What would be your recommendation?
No, I think first of all, there is plenty of information on what the imports are. So there is to make sure that there is a market for the products they're thinking of. Definitely visit the country. It's very important to get to know. It's easy to get there. There are flights, daily flights from Miami, from Atlanta, from New York. There are daily flights to Bogota. So it's very easy. It's a 3-hour, 4-hour flight, depending on where you are taking. The cities are very secure nowadays, so it's not a dangerous trip. And support yourself with a local organization. It could be the World Trade Center in any city of Colombia, or the Chamber of Commerce, and ideally someone that will. The U.S. Embassy also helps a lot to organize local meetings with potential buyers. But it's important for small and medium companies to get a distributor that will be able to support them, a local representative that will help them navigate through the paperwork and what's needed to access the market.
Dr. Ronderos, one of the things that,
thank you.
my apologies, Melvin. I was just going to say that one of the things that also is clear, we were talking about Colombia as a gateway. You know, setting up a distribution center there in Colombia gives you know, ready access to the rest of South America, not just you know, shipping through, but actually setting up distribution to open up the South American market. So I think it's just brilliant.
Yeah, just several companies have already set up very important distribution centers, and in places near Cali, near the coffee region, that could be equidistant from both the Pacific and the Atlantic. So when Cartagena, 70% of the operation of Puerto Cartagena is logistics. There are distribution centers that don't come for the Colombian market, but that there are repacked into other destinations. So yes, it's becoming increasingly a center for redistribution, and very much the case of the port of Cartagena. It's only 30% of what comes into the port comes to Colombia. All the other containers that arrive to Cartagena they are either repacked or redistributed, and it's a very important logistics center.
Thank you, Dr. Ronderos. And as a segue of the recommendations that you were giving Arkansas small businesses, I'm going to also say that if they contact the World Trade Center here in Arkansas, we certainly can help them connect with these organizations that Dr. Ronderos mentioned. We also have the STEP grant available for Arkansas companies that are eligible for the SBA STEP grant, and to surely contact us for that. And thank you, Dr. Ronderos. The other question that I had is you mentioned currently some unrest after 2020 during COVID-19 and protests. how has the situation in Venezuela impacted Colombia, and what are the positive aspects that you can see from what's happening in Venezuela as far as Colombia, and how do you see that it's affecting Colombia, if at all?
Well, we have two phases to that question. There has been good Venezuelan migration that has impacted very positive the oil industry, because there were lots of professionals with a lot of experience in the oil industry. We have also had some manufacturing companies that no longer operate in Venezuela that are now operating from Colombia, and that has brought about a lot of factories, particularly in food. And a lot of young, very well-trained professionals have settled in Colombia. So that's the good part. The other part is that the people in need of basics have migrated from Venezuela to Colombia. That's a large population of very poor people. We have currently over 2 million immigrants from Venezuela coming to Colombia, looking for social services, looking for medical support, looking for housing, looking for jobs, and that has had a very large impact in the Colombian economy.
Now, guys, as it turns out, we're at the hour now. I wanted to, Melvin, do you have one more question?
I was going to read a few of the questions or statements that people had. One person said the alliance of Avianca with PACA has provided Colombia a great connectivity in both passenger and cargo. That's a very good point. Someone said, hi, I've been here for 10 years in Colombia. I do not speak Spanish. I've built sold companies here. I think there is a lot more advantages. I am actually building my third company here. As an example of the COP is a huge advantage on the US dollar, the Colombian peso, right now for other company investments. So of course the exchange rate, he refers to exchange rate. And someone, of course, said that they agreed with the labor factors that Dr. Ronderos mentioned. And lastly, there is one statement saying, or a question, what are Colombia's most successful and current and emerging export industries? I think that we covered that, and Dr. Ronderos covered that in the presentation. You can go back to the recording and see the different exports to Arkansas into the world, and from Arkansas and from Arkansas to the world also.
Perfect. Melvin and Dr. Ronderos, thank you so much for being our guest and moderator for this webinar. I think it's been incredibly informative. You know, I have learned some stuff that I actually did not know about Colombia. And so I think that the information that we provided here should allow some people to look at some opportunities that do exist with Colombia, with the free trade agreement, and the logistics that are occurring. We appreciate everyone's patience while we struggle through some of these technical issues, but I think overall it played out very well. And thank you so much for your time. And I think we will go ahead and end the webinar here. Dr. Ronderos, again, thank you so much for your time.
Well, thank you very much. And I'm sorry for the inconvenience of my computer. I have to get out and buy a new one.
Okay, so we're going to go ahead and
the process.
We're going to go ahead and put up a slide that has the contact information for the participants today. If you'll just give us just a second here.
And while you do that, thank you, Dr. Ronderos, for taking your time to talk to us about Colombia. And this is between Colombia and Arkansas. And also, Rudy, thank you for having us and for facilitating the process of this webinar.
Thank you so much. And if everyone will be just patient just for a second here, we're trying to bring up the last slide that has the contact information of Melvin and Dr. Ronderos. There we go. All right, so there's maybe you can take a picture with your phone. And I'm Rudy Ortiz. I happen to be the current chair of the Arkansas District Export Council, and there's my information there, as well as the administrative coordinator for the Arkansas District Export Council, Ms. Heidi Whitman. Feel free to contact any of us with any questions that you might have, and if we can be of service, please feel free to call us or contact us. Thank you again.
Thank you.